This is the Life Athletics Podcast. Level up.
Life athletes, welcome back to the Life Athletics Podcast with me, your host, Nick Wood. On this show, we explore the mindsets and strategies of extraordinary individuals who are committed to winning their game in life and helping others to do so as well. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, my friend, Sascha Haert. Sascha is a renowned human behaviors expert and performance coach, dedicated to empowering high-achieving individuals worldwide. With over a decade of experience, he has helped leaders, entrepreneurs, and freedom seekers to unlock their full potential. Sascha's approach is truly transformative. Through cutting-edge techniques like sensual intelligence, human value exchange, nonviolent communication, negotiation skills, and energy management, he offers a unique blend of expertise. By tapping into intuition and fostering self-awareness, he guides his clients to break free from self-imposed limitations, leading a more authentic lifestyle aligned with their true purpose. Passionate about inner game mastery and lifestyle design, Sascha's impact shines through his work. Join us as we delve into the fascinating world of personal sovereignty, love, confidence, and self-discovery. Get ready to unlock a new paradigm of possibility with the incredible Sascha Haert on the Life Athletics Podcast. Okay, quick note about today's episode. Sascha reached out to me a couple months ago telling me that he'd thought of me during his most recent Vipassana and asking me if I was still doing the podcast. I'd been planning on relaunching this one, and so we set up a time to jump on. Before hitting record, Sascha said that he wanted the episode to be about us and not just him, and he asked if I'd be willing to try that, and I agreed. I'm sharing this now to preface that I'll be talking more than normally and sharing some pretty intimate and vulnerable parts of my past and my history. So, thank you for listening. You ready?
Ready.
Sascha, welcome to the Life Athletics Podcast.
Thanks, brother.
It's really good to have you here. For those of you who don't know, and you're going to be finding out as we go, Sascha and I have known each other for, we met probably 8 years ago, 8 years ago. And we've been through some stuff. You were there when I almost died. Episode 199, if people want to hear more about that. We're not going to go into that much detail, but I broke my skull, and Sascha was one of the people who helped make sure that I didn't die, and I appreciate you very much. You did my coaching program years ago, and there's a testimonial on my website that I changed your life, and so I take credit for all of the brilliance that's going to be coming up. And I'm just so proud of you, and I love you lots, and I'm happy to have you on the show.
I love you too, brother. And, I didn't lie when I say you changed my life, because one, you pushed me a lot in areas where I'm like, this is so not, I was coming from the city, and all of a sudden I'm living in Bali, like a totally different lifestyle. And I was like challenged in all areas you can possibly imagine, even though I seem to be quite having my shit together. And then, because of you, actually, I met my baby mama later on. Not actually, pretty much like as soon as we finished the program, like a couple of days later, she stepped into my life.
And it was something we were working on as well. And so it's really beautiful to hear you say that, because every time I see you and your son, there's part of me that feels just so much pride in you, but also that I was part of that potentially, because you and his mother, like, I knew both of you you were both in the same town and had never met. It was like energetically just not, and then something shifted and you met, and she's a beautiful human and you're a beautiful human, and yeah.
What a journey. Yeah, you pushed me to go to ecstatic dance. You're like, my heart is not open, so you have to go to like ecstatic dance and move your body. I was like, what? Ecstatic dance? Like, no alcohol in the middle of the day, like a bunch of like weirdos dancing and movement meditation is like, leave me alone, like, But then I did, contact dance and all these other things, and that's how I met her.
Yeah, to your credit, you listened, right?
Yeah.
Because the point was to drop into your heart, right?
Mhm.
It's in your name. And sometimes when things feel so obvious, they can feel like, well, no, I've got that already. Check, right? Like I'm very emotional. So sometimes I think that means I've got my emotions handled,
Yeah.
right? And it's not till it's put in front of me that I realize, oh no, that's an area I have to work on,
Yeah.
right?
And I think, it's actually understanding and realizing that there are certain areas where we can just improve, and there's some weaknesses, or whatever you want to call it. It's a huge strength, because it allows us to not only look at these things but then make these shifts and changes, and like figuring out ways and tactical way, like just to move things into a different direction rather than staying where we're at. It's like playing basketball,
Hmm.
like you can't become like a player that plays on an international level if you're not improving your game. It's just not possible. So
And
you
you
need
can't
to
do it
look
by
at
yourself.
exactly. You can't do it by yourself, and you
Yeah.
can't do it if you're not willing enough to critically look at yourself and your game and your skills and everything else, and try to figure out ways how can you improve that. You know.
So we're going to lean into some of these things, and I want to talk about basketball because I always want to talk about basketball. But there's um, there's something that you said earlier that I just want to underline, and it goes into a lot of the themes that we're going to be talking about here, where you look like you have your shit together,
Mm.
right? And I was a little bit nervous coaching you and
Mm.
talking to you about my program because you look like you have your shit together, right? Whenever people referred to you, it was almost with a touch of devotion and admiration, like you were up here. And there's good and challenging inside of that space because I get some of it, right? We're both
Yeah.
tall guys, and I sound like this. And people will sometimes say that I have the voice of God and ask me to narrate their lives and assume that I have a certain level of something that I don't
Mm.
always think matches my reality. And so as we're going to be talking about men,
Yeah.
right? We're going to be talking about healthy masculine and like the ability to relate. I want you to first talk about um, what it's like to be seen a certain way, to almost be pedestalized, and yeah, what that does in your life.
This might sound a little bit cocky, but um, it kind of always has been that way. Because I mean, it's probably similar for you, because we're always tall, we're always quite skilled. I was an athlete like from the age of 6, started playing pretty much on the highest level from the age of 10, moving into like the junior national team, playing representing Germany from the age of 14. And like, it has always been that way. That I was kind of not doing the things that every other normal kid was doing. Um, and then on top of it, when you have this awareness and like, okay, you somewhat have a little bit of beauty, and
You're a very good looking
you
man. For those of you who are just listening to this, right? Go
trying to be
check out his
humble,
Instagram. We'll put it in the show notes.
trying to be humble here. It's just like it just became my norm in many, many, many ways.
Hmm.
And that's also a blessing and a curse, because when people look at you and you're very like, you're tall, you're good looking, you seem to have your shit together, like you're successful, you're running businesses, blah 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 blah. It's like they put you in a very specific category. They don't look at you as the person necessarily, but like, okay, it's that guy. Oh, he must be a womanizer. He must be a playboy. He must be like this XYZ, right? And it's the same for women. If you're a very pretty, beautiful woman, what happens a lot is like, oh, she's either she's a gold digger, or she gets everything that she wants, and people treat her differently, and like, or if I don't know if you had this, but in Germany there was this idea of this narrative of like blonde, beautiful woman. They must be dumb.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's this thing.
I think that's
Yeah, it's this
international.
thing.
People assume that.
Okay, yeah. And it's so sad and it's so annoying that we're like putting people in these boxes straight away, without even knowing them at all. And and then what I realized is, you know what, let me just play with this. If people have this idea, this perception of me, I just let them in that perception, whatever that is, and I'm playing into it rather than trying to change their mind and making them, understand me, sorry, who I really am. I'm like, no, if they really don't want to get to know me, then I already know those are not my people.
It's one of the things that I admire about you, because as I got to know you, as I brushed aside the sort of prejudice of that guy over there, right? Like whatever whispers,
Yeah.
and got to know you, you're not cocky, right? You said that what you said, like we're saying, might sound cocky, but I think it's, if you're good looking and you've been told you're good looking your whole life, to be able to say I'm good looking isn't cocky, right? You don't walk around arrogant about it, in my experience.
Yeah.
And I've known you for a while and in a bunch of different settings. Um, and so there's a grace to you that I appreciate a lot. And so it's interesting because for me, and this is going to lead into one of the things that I think is really important to who you are. But for me, I think I didn't quite have the same level of support that you had. And I'll put it gently. And what I've often felt being pedestalized is I'm going to disappoint people. I'm going to not match their view, right? You have the grace to say, if that's what happens, like your sense of yourself is strong enough and centered enough that that's not changing, depending on if some random person feels like, oh, I thought you were a bigger deal than this, or more like together, right? You are still you. And so I want to talk a little bit about where that comes from for you.
Yeah, I love that question, because it's one thing, man. It's just really one big thing that made all the difference for me. And it's because when I grew up, I always say I grew up in a fairy tale childhood. I was spoiled with so much love and presence and time by both of my parents, that like I never really had to look for love outside of me, or like, I didn't need it to get it from other people or women, really. Because I knew whatever happens in my life, like my parents, the love that I have there, it's so strong and it's so there, that gave me so much security and safety, that I really was able in a humble way to establish some sort of attitude as like, I don't care what you think about me. And I do, obviously, it's not like you're completely like black and white, but generally speaking, it doesn't affect me as much. So that gives such an inner strength and confidence. Yeah, man. So a lot of this I attribute and give to my parents, the way how they raised me.
It's really interesting because there was a joke that came up when you said, well, I don't care what people think of me, but well, I do, right? That moment, part of me wanted to jump in and say, well, yeah, you're not a sociopath, right? You're secure, you have a secure attachment style.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that it's actually pretty rare for people to, like, books are written, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, right? People keep going around, I don't give a fuck, I don't give a fuck. They clearly give a fuck,
Yeah.
right? And you're allowed to swear on the show, in case you're wondering. And so there's something around almost having to apologize for not caring what other people think, right? So there's just that moment, there's a tenderness that opened up in me. It's like, wow, this is where we are, right? Societally, that we have to clarify, no, I do care somewhat, right?
Yeah.
It's not
And
driving my every action.
yeah, and don't you think that's so fucked up that we're living here, let's say for 90 years, like we're on this path, we're on this earth and whatnot, and then like we're basically caring more what other people think of us than just living our lives and doing like the best that we can with like in the best most aligned way how we want to live our life. and care way more about like, what do we really want? How do
Yeah.
we really want to show up for us? And I felt like in many ways I was just very blessed that I had that security and safety to be able to do that, rather than falling into this trap of thinking more what other people think of me.
There's an example of this that I just think is mind blowing from your life that I didn't ask you before if you're willing to tell this story, but it's on your social media, so I think you are. But when you almost burned down your house, or you did burn down your house, can you
Yeah, I kind of
tell?
did. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
can you
of
tell
course.
that story and then your father's reaction?
Yeah. So when I was 6 years old, and I was a really good boy, they let me alone at home, and they went out for dinner, whatnot. And my dad had this really beautiful lighter. It looked like a truck, and I wanted to play with it. It was just after his birthday, so there was a bunch of wrapping gift paper in the house and like in a cardboard box and whatnot. And then I took a glass of water, put it right next to the cardboard box, and like I picked this lighter out of his jacket. I I took a little bit of this wrapping gift paper and I light up the wrapping. And then what happened is it just burned on fire immediately, way too much. It dropped into the cardboard box. All of a sudden, shit, everything is burning. And I'm like taking this small little glass, trying to like, get rid of the fire. Didn't work. Run into the bathroom, try with a shower head to like not enough pressure, and then I had to run outside, run to our neighbors. And then my parents come back at some point, and there's like basically fire trucks, police, ambulance, not two blocks, but like two entrances completely evacuated because it was an apartment block. Um, and I'm there like totally in shock, not knowing what it is. And I am completely denying absolutely everything that happened. It's like, I don't know what happened, And then my dad, the police officer, he was interviewing me, and my dad was there. And then without me even noticing, the police officer basically got all the information that he needed to know what really happened. And the way how my dad reacted was like later on, and I remember this to this day because, even though I was just 6, but he was like, he took full responsibility of that incident. He was like, you know what? It's my fault. I have not introduced you to fire. I have not made you aware of the danger of fire. I've introduced you to like sharp knives. I introduced you to scissors. I introduced, whatever, but I didn't do fire. So he took full responsibility, and therefore he took all this pressure away from me, and I could just lean into it. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm a 6-year-old boy. And he's like, look, I'm just happy you're alive, because obviously that could have ended very differently too. And all these material things and everything else doesn't mean shit, we don't care about that. Like, you're safe, we're good, it's my fault, I take responsibility. And that changed everything. I never created any type of trauma around it.
And so, I mean, it moves me, right? The the level of responsibility, and solidity internally is commendable, right? And so I just want to underline that because again, we're going to be talking about masculinity and healthy masculine a whole bunch. Um, I'm just feeling into whether I want to tell the story or not. And uh, before we started, you said you wanted this to be about us. So I'm going to
Yeah,
share the parallel.
please.
On my 14th birthday, um, I had some friends over and we were playing video games. My mom got annoyed and sent us to go walk the dog to work off some energy like 3 in the morning. And this one guy who I invited, I hadn't seen since grade 3. I went to 9 different public schools before I went to high school. My mom kept changing my school. I wasn't a troublemaker, but just, I don't know. So this guy had been my best friend in grade 3, but I hadn't seen him in years. And so suddenly now in grade 8, he he turned back up. So I invited him. And as we were leaving to go for this walk, he started grabbing paper and like my cologne bottle and a lighter. And at one point during the walk, he was gathering more things. And we cut through like a schoolyard, and he stopped and started stuffing paper into tires.
Yeah.
And one of my friends was like, Nick, you should go. Like take your dog and like start heading home. And so I did. They caught up to us, and I could see behind me, he threw a couple bottles into the window of the school, trying to create Molotov cocktails. And when he caught up to me, he gave me the lighter back because it was from my house. And when the police caught us, they took me and him, and then the other two guys went home to tell my mom and my stepdad and that I'd been arrested. And so I got to spend the night like in this room with like no door handle and just like white walls, feeling like shit, right? And I had to go to court, and because it wasn't on my record, because I was a minor, it was going to be wiped from my record anyway, and I was told just to plead guilty. And so I had to pay back thousands of dollars and do 60 hours of community service, and which someone at my university said was more community service than he was given for selling drugs to kids. And at no point did any of the adults in my life say, we shouldn't have sent you out at 3 a.m. like yeah, 14 and you're 6'3" or whatever I was, but you're still a kid, and that's kind of on us, right? So lots of shame, lots of trauma, and I had to go and make $2,000 to pay off, and at that age, that was a lot of money. And so just the parallel of the two, more perpendicular than parallel, but like the similarity of the narratives and what it does to the psyche, I think is really quite powerful. And so yeah, I love that your father reacted the way that he did. So let's lean into a little bit with the work that you're doing, because you recently started working mostly with men after working mostly with women.
Yeah.
So tell me about this and what the work is that you're doing, right? And then what had you start to shift over?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the coaching industry and field has been in my life pretty much my whole life. Being an athlete, like you kind of like you're a player, but also you need to coach. You have a team. And I was the captain of the national team. So there's like all these communication things, all these things that you need to learn, from communication with like on and off the court with referees and players and coaches and time management and discipline and winning and losing. There's so much, right? It's like I learned so much in that I was able to integrate into my life because of basketball, playing on an international level. But then there's another thing that happened, and I was rejecting this coaching path for a long time. I had so many different women that I never knew. I never met them before. They just came into my life, and I'm walking at the beach, and then I'm seeing this woman. We're locking eyes for a second. We pass each other, and I stop and I turn around. She's always walking towards me, and all of a sudden she's just like crying, like breaking down in tears. And I kind of like took care of her and like helped her. She was going through some traumatic stuff with her, all the time, random, like sitting at a cafe, and a woman just like stands up at Alchemy. Like we did a lot of the coaching like pretty much right next to Alchemy at that time too, right?
Yeah.
And
So
she
for those of
stands
you who
up
don't know, that's a place in Ubud in Bali. Yeah.
in Bali, and she grabs her smoothie bowl from the place where she was sitting. She walks towards me, sits down, and just starts talking to me and tells me her deepest, darkest, most intimate secrets. And I've never met this woman. I've never talked to her. I don't know who she is. And I'm listening. I'm like, I'm just being present and allowing her to get this out of her system. And then at some point I asked her, like, why do you tell me all this? Those are your deepest, darkest, most intimate secrets, And she's like, I don't know. I just felt like I need to open up to you and tell you everything about me. And these things happened all the time, So then very naturally, I then started working with women just because it has always been in my field. And at some point it moved. It moved to working with men on a one-on-one basis. But when I went to Vipassana just 3 weeks ago, I had a very, very strong moment of feeling extremely embarrassed and ashamed to be a man. So for everyone who doesn't know what Vipassana is, it's the technique of the Buddha, and it's his way out of suffering. So you're spending 10 days in silence and you're meditating for 10 to 12 hours every single day. And all you do is just like you sit and you meditate. You be in silence, you don't talk to anyone, you don't listen to anyone, you just be with yourself. And that's really uncomfortable. Like, don't get me wrong. This is a rigid
We live in a
practice.
world where a lot of people can't go 10 seconds without looking at their phone, right? So you have no phone, you have no books, you're not allowed to write and take notes. There's no distractions. You're just you with you.
Men and women are completely separated. You don't work out. You have to be with yourself, and all these distractions are taken away from you. And then you go deep within, and we started with 22 men and 45 women. And then on day 6 or 7, about 30% of the men left. And I just felt so embarrassed, like really having like a little bit of anger inside of me, I noticed, because man, what happened to us? Us men, like being so weak that we can't even sit for 10 freaking days. And I look on the other side and I see the women in the meditation hall, 45 women, and they all finished. No one left. Just one woman because she broke her freaking foot. That's a fair excuse.
She gets a pass.
Yeah. And so I had so many women who basically reached out to me in the past, and was like, when do you start working with men? One, obviously, since I work so much with women, I know a lot about them. I know how their mind works. And have a pretty clear understanding of many things in terms of the psyche and human behaviors and whatnot. So I got really, really passionate about working with men, and that's what the program is that I'm going to start now.
Yeah, so I want to lean into the program a little bit, but there's a couple things. One, I think that working with men serves women.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
I think that there is an importance to take ownership of the fact that most of the awful things on the planet are like men. Most of the murders, most of the assaults are like, so men are hurting and lashing out, and have been for a long time. And so it's interesting because my reaction to that story is also frustration and a lot of empathy and compassion, because the inability to be with oneself is a very fundamental and foundational weak point, right? It's kind of like, oh, I'm not able to stand up. If you have a able body, right, whatever that means, and you should be able to, like, but you can't go for a walk, that's an issue, right? So a big part of life athletics is looking at, I mean, it's a long story and I've told it a bunch of times, but I was a trainer in a gym, and someone who was morbidly obese came in to ask about training their biceps, but they were pointing at their shoulders, and just talked at me and then walked away. Right. Yeah. And so I was like, they didn't get anything from me. Where am I that out of shape and that blind and resistant to help? Right. Yeah. So the metaphor of being like emotionally morbidly obese kind of comes up with this, where these guys need help, right? They're going to die internally if something doesn't shift. And yeah, and they don't know where to start.
Yeah. Well, right. That's a thing. I think society, unfortunately, I mean, in many ways, society doesn't allow men to really be in their power anymore. Everything that men do, if it turns into like something masculine and actually like it's in alignment with like masculine traits, it's toxic. Speaking up, having an opinion, it's toxic. Like, there's so many things where we're like empowered women, which is absolutely beautiful and super important, but then at the same time we completely emasculated men. And
I agree with you.
It got to a point, right?
Yeah.
And it's so bad. And obviously that's not the way. Playing basketball is like, you got to know where my strengths and where my weaknesses, and we got to play together and like support each other in order to win that freaking game. But like, if we're completely bumping heads and like everything is evil here and everything is beautiful over there, then like that doesn't really work. We can't function as a society anymore.
Basketball is an interesting example because it's masculine, right? It's competitive. And then there's the bad boy Pistons, right? Like there's like, which people would say like the certain players might not be able to play in the league anymore because they were just bullies. They're just trying to hurt people, right?
Yeah.
And that would be toxic.
Yeah.
The term toxic masculinity is an interesting one because some people take it as masculinity is toxic, right? I hear it as masculinity is healthy, and then there's a toxic form.
Yeah.
Right. And toxic traits. And I think the toxic traits come out when people don't have the awareness or training to be able to vent frustrations in a healthy way. And honestly, I mean, you know him too, Aaron Kleinerman. We were doing one of these. I think he's been on my podcast. We've done so many Facebook Lives together. And he said that the most toxic masculine that he's found in a lot of his work is often in a woman's body. And then the most toxic feminine is often in a man's body. Right. And then the warped bit is having like a toxic feminine in a man's body comes out as toxic masculine, but it's because the balance isn't there. Mm-hmm. Right. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I never heard it this way. I can totally see it. And it basically comes for me, and if we want to talk about men, it's like, we just don't know how can we be an integrated version, a healthy integrated version of a man anymore. Which means like, well, I know I'm strong. I know I'm logical. I know I'm rational. I can do things that the woman cannot do, or is not supposed to do, or it's better if she doesn't do it, if you just think about physical work. And there are other things where I'm like, I'm just not as good as them. I'm not talking about cleaning and like, like not that. Like there's so many other things in nurturing and caring and providing and in a more gentle, soft way that we men don't necessarily, that's not our strong suit, but that doesn't mean just because we don't have that, all of a sudden we're not good men anymore. And I think too many men have just given into this narrative of just getting very comfortable in like having strong, powerful women and taking the back seat. And, it makes them more and more unattractive. Men don't know how to communicate more often than not, which is a big problem, right? Men don't really know how they can properly show up in a relationship, or even for friends, in terms of like really core values and like being integral in like how we show up in the world. We don't have that anymore, to be loyal to friends, to partners, to family, like to be responsible, to be reliable, like all these things are like just out of the window. And I think that's one of these things, because we don't do these things anymore. We don't have a center. So therefore, women can push us around in all ways that we want to, and that they want to. And like we're not like, for you, I would say like, you're not the strong tree anymore. That's just like rooted in the ground, and like whatever happens, it's not going to move you in any kind of way. We lost that as men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. My last name is Wood, right? So the tree metaphor always works for me. I want to underline for the people listening to this, because we're getting close to a very classic polarity conversation, right? Men are like this, women are like that. And I don't think that's that's not what I observe in you. So what's interesting, and I want to make sure that we speak into the nuance as well, because I've never seen you be forceful. And I've never seen you need to be, and you're also not a pushover, right? there's this grounded sense of solidity in who you are, where it's very clear you don't feel like you need to prove it to most people or anybody, right? And so when we're talking about like healthy masculine, we're not talking about when a lot of people talk the whole alpha male, go prove yourself, and I'm alpha, no, I'm alpha, no, I'm alpha, right? Like you and I are both, well, how tall are you? Like 6'5", right? Like we're 6'4",
You can
right? I'm
make me
6'6".
6'5". Okay. Like I'll
Well,
take
you have
6'5".
hair, I don't, so it balances that. But like we're big guys. There's
Yeah.
never been any conflict, not once, in terms of like who's the alpha here. Like, and so when you're talking about that strong masculine, it feels more David Data-ish in the way that I interpret it, of the unwavering presence of the masculine.
Yeah.
Right. So I'd love for you to talk about how you're able to have this gentleness that's not fragile, but there's a
Yeah.
tenderness, right? Like how you're able to manage these different qualities, even the nurturing. I've seen you with Zen, your son, right? And so women aren't the only nurturing ones.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that a little bit, but I said a lot, and I'd love for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you brought up this whole thing, you need to be proof. I'm alpha, now you're alpha, and like that in itself, if you have to do that, you're not alpha. It's pretty much that already. If you have to prove like, well, I'm the top G here, I'm the alpha, whatever, then it's like you're not really the big alpha guy in the room. Like, because you don't have to prove that at all. Like, if you have to speak about it, you're probably not the guy, you
Yeah.
know? So if you have this center within that knows like, okay, I'm standing for this is my core, those are my values, those are my principles, here's what I allow, here are my boundaries, that makes all the big difference. And then you also know like you can come from a place of love and allowing and really see people for who they are, and what they're struggling with, what is their beauty, what is their genius, and it doesn't threaten you because you don't have to prove it, that you're better or stronger or whatever. It doesn't really matter anymore at that point. And
No, I
that
think that's
comes
where
with,
the wounded masculine and what some people call toxic masculine comes in, where people aren't solid enough in themselves, so they feel that they need to act out on the world.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
So they don't take responsibility for themselves,
yeah, it's a good word to use there. Yeah, good.
right? It's like, well, if you really get to know yourself and you go within and you do the work and you do coaching or like, whatever it is that like really helps you to become a better human being, then like you can take responsibility for your own bullshit too. And that makes you stronger, and you understand that it makes you stronger rather than weaker. So, we have with our team, we have this thing of tough love, and
Mm.
all the Yogi Lab guys and whatnot, and we call each other out on our bullshit all the time, because we know it comes from a place of love. We know we want to help each other to like turn into a better human being and become more capable, more skillful, being able to act and behave in this world and navigate through any type of challenges with more ease and with more skills. And sometimes it's super uncomfortable and you don't want to hear these things because like, oh shit, like they can see me, they see things that I couldn't see before. And that's actually a blessing,
Mm.
because they're giving you, it's like I always encourage people to do that with me, like criticism or tell me things that I can't see, because ultimately what that means is like they're giving me a piece of reality, a piece of truth that I haven't been able to observe within myself. Now I can. So I'm closer to reality. I'm closer to truth, which is beautiful. If I don't have that, then I'm taking one facet, one side of reality away that I don't really want to look at, and I just look into the other direction. And that's not really looking at the totality of truth.
So one of the things that I used to ask in this podcast all the time were habits of thought and habits of action. And what you just shared is a really important thing that I want to underline there, because how you receive the criticism, right, or the notes, or however you want to phrase it, matters. Because if your commitment, excuse me, If your commitment is to truth and to being the best version of yourself possible, as opposed to looking good. I'm alpha no matter what. I'm alpha. I'm alpha. Right? If your commitment is to truth and being truly the best version of yourself, when someone gives you a comment that you can improve in a certain area, if it's someone who you trust and value their opinion, then it can land. I mean, let's just go to basketball. If you're shooting and your elbow's out, right, it's going to affect your shot. So if someone says, hey, get your elbow in, right?
Yeah.
They're not saying you're a piece of shit.
Nope.
They're not saying you're a bad person and a failure as a human. They're saying, get your elbow in, fix your shot, right? It might cost us the game if you don't fix your shot. And we need you because we value you.
Yeah.
Right.
I always call it I coined it the athlete mentality, where you understand like criticism and failure are actually like really, really important pieces. And I talked about this a little bit earlier on this conversation, are very, very important pieces for you to become a better basketball player, to become a better human being, to become more capable in whatever kind of industry or field you work in. You know, if you're not looking at these things, my dad always used to say, you know, rookies practice and train the things that they're already good at.
Yeah.
Professionals practice and train all the things that they're not good at.
It was a weak point of mine for years. Right. So I was born with a concave chest and it's called pectus excavatum. Hated my body for years. And so I was embarrassed about my upper body and I didn't really train it. My legs were tree trunks. Right. Like I got to the place once where I like just had striated quads. Just each muscle was just there. And my upper body wasn't matching whatsoever because it was so much easier to move massive weight with my legs than to face feeling weak anywhere. And yeah, without having that core of support, feeling weak anywhere meant I was a failure as a human, right? Internally. And so what you're saying, I think, is so important because even with someone, a lot of things come really easily to me. My weak point historically has been leaning into those weak points to train them up, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a big one. And, you know, it's always a work in progress. You know, it's
Sure.
not like from one moment to another, all of a sudden everything is like sorted out. And there's always a time and a place when we can really start looking at these things that are quite uncomfortable to look at. But when we do, and we actually start to embrace them and see the beauty, because now we're actually in a position of power, because now all of a sudden we can change it. We can really make some shifts and changes. If we don't, we're gonna keep ourselves in a powerless position to a certain degree. So
What's
how much can you show up as a powerful, integrated version of a man if you're not willing to look at yourself in its totality?
100%. So powerful integrated version of a man. Let's start looking at this because one of the things that I say with life athletics is train where you are for where you want to be. Right? Because if I start trying to deadlift 600 pounds or whatever, I'm out of shape after breaking my head, right? So it will just hurt me if I can move the weight at all. So I need to train where I am, right? The level of strength and flexibility that I have currently to get to a place that I want to be. Emotionally, energetically, I think it's the same thing. So for these 6 guys who walked out of the Vipassana, 10-day Vipassana is not a joke, right? That's a big deal for a lot of people. And for people who aren't doing any emotional labor in their lives, I think it's pure ego to try to step into that as step 1. Right?
I disagree.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, look, you go to a Vipassana retreat and you have people that are like 70 plus and they've never done it before and they sit for 2 days with no problem. They're just like, you make a commitment. Like in the beginning, on day 0, they talk about, okay, you make a commitment here. For those 10 days, you just give it a fair shot. It's just 10 days, and it's going to change your life.
Right.
But a fair shot, explore it. So you make a commitment with yourself ultimately. Okay, for 10 days, I'm just going to meditate. I'm going to sit. I'm going to like really allow this technique, this practice to do its magic.
Sure.
But when you leave at the middle of the day, you're breaking your own words. And that to me is like,
100%.
in terms of social responsibility and integrity, it's absolutely terrible.
Yes. And I think that there's a lot of people where integrity to themselves and integrity with other people is a stretch goal for them. Right or wrong. It's a problem, totally. But if someone came into the gym and said, I can't move that weight yet, right? I'm going to be like, well, there's 7-year-olds who are coming and doing that. So, well, okay, the 7-year-old might be moving in that way more than you ever have. So as a young person, you should be able to, air quote, do this. But wow, okay, you're more off. So what I was curious about, 2 things. When people come to work with you, what are you aiming them at, right? So that integrated masculine. And then what are maybe some ways to train from where they are, where they're not keeping their word to themselves or anyone in their lives, wondering why life's not working when they're not count onable in any way, right? It's like, I don't know what's wrong. Well, are you doing what you said you were going to do? No. It's like, well, maybe start there. But so where does your work take men, right? And what are some things that people could do to go from just that lost place to somewhere closer to what you would envision solid is?
Great question. The pathway for me that I find extremely powerful, that I've seen with my clients and even with myself, is like the first and most important step is like, know yourself. It's like, you want to be able to look into the mirror and you want to see, okay, where do I fuck up every single day? Where am I not in alignment with my word? Where am I not in integrity? Where I say one thing and do the other? Like, that's the first piece. If you can't even look at this piece of truth, because it's undeniable, either you do it or you don't, and if you can't see that, then that's a problem.
So do you have like a process for that? Do you have, like, are people taking notes, tracking, like it's from antiquity, right? Like, know thyself, the Oracle of Delphi, right? And most of the world is not there.
One simple exercise, which is quite confronting, is take a full day from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep. Track absolutely everything to the minute. It's like, okay, I'm in the bathroom, 10 minutes on my toilet, on the toilet seat, on Instagram, write it down. Like, having 3 hours of phone conversations with my girlfriends, write it down. Like, you're supposed to work, be in the office, do XYZ, but you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, you shop, like all these things, you want to write it down, like to the minute. It's annoying. Like, that in itself is already annoying, because it's like, oh fuck, constantly you have to write something down. But like, you will see, even within, like, throughout the day, it's like, holy shit, I'm losing so much time. I'm not doing the things that I'm intending to do. It's like, well, let me work on this email. But then halfway through writing this email, you're getting distracted because your phone is ringing and you're like taking a 15-minute phone call, So you can see where your mind and your actions and your focus are completely out of alignment.
And there's levels to it.
Yeah, there are levels to it, absolutely.
Like, I've been doing morning walks. Like, my body still hasn't recovered fully from my breaking the skull thing. And I just got out of shape. So I wanted to start running and I couldn't. So I've been walking and trying to do 10,000 steps a day, and it's been good. But there's some days where if a morning meeting cancels or rearranges or something, reschedules, and my morning suddenly has more space to it, I found myself still doing the walk, so keeping my word to myself, but after an hour of doom scrolling on Instagram, right? And just watching how everything becomes so much more wobbly. And so part of my training has been do what I say I'm going to do by when I say I'm going to do it, regardless of anyone else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can relate a lot to what you're sharing here.
Yeah. And it's such a super powerful exercise. And, I'll do it um, regularly, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I'll pick a day here and there where I'm like, okay, yeah, let me really like look a little bit deeper. What am I actually doing? How aligned am I actually with my actions? And when am I stepping away from it? And that's sometimes it's really confronting. It's like you tell yourself by 10 p.m. you don't want to be on your phone anymore. And then at midnight, you're still on like your phone, doing emails, I don't know, watching a movie and this and that. Is like, okay, shit. I'm not really, I'm not taking care of myself ultimately.
100%.
Then it goes so much further. There's so many exercises in terms of confidence and communication and the way how we communicate with the other sex, with women. And so many men, they're struggling. They're really, really, really struggling.
So let's just pause this for a second. Let's flip it a
Cool.
little bit.
All right.
So ideally, right? You're working with a guy. I'm going to change the voice here. You're working with a guy. He's done your program. How long generally are you working with people?
So my one-on-one program is like 3 or 6 months.
Okay. So
Usually where I
after,
start.
let's just say after 6 months,
Yeah.
right? They go for that version.
Yeah.
The goal is for them to emerge with what and as what, right? So paint that sort of
Yeah.
avatar.
Yeah. Okay, cool. It depends. First and foremost, stepping more into a confident version of themselves.
Mm,
That means you have to learn to look at your weaknesses. That means you have to learn how to communicate. That means to really like figuring out what are your goals, where do you actually want to go? Because a lot of people, they don't know, men and women, they don't really know what they want. They never like really create some clarity around that. So therefore they're never also going to be able to create action plans and a roadmap around that either. So then
100%.
they can't hold themselves accountable. So it's a cop out. Not knowing where you really want to go is an easy cop out to never really take the first steps, because you don't have to hold yourself accountable to anything.
Yep.
Right.
I found the same thing in my work. People will say, "Oh, well, I don't know what I want to do." It's because, like, the internal safety says it's not safe to know what I want to do, because if I know and I don't do it, then I feel like a piece of shit. Right.
Yeah.
So just to save
Should.
myself, well, if you can use that as motivation and not just as self-flagellation, not just beating yourself up, right? But that tweak needs to happen,
Correct.
right? Which is what we were talking about earlier in terms of criticism.
Yeah.
Some people
Yeah.
just collapse.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, get up, realize this is making you better, and let's go. Okay.
Yeah.
So keep going. This is great.
So mindset is another really, really big one. Often we have these very negative self-talk, these self-sabotaging habits, like even in the mind, the way how we communicate with ourselves,
Yeah.
and which basically becomes our actions and our behaviors. So what I found a lot is actually calling people out on their own bullshit, and like helping them to get out of their loop, this constant loop that's like this broken record that's playing over and over again, and it's like that hurts to see that, and that hurts for them to like actually realize, oh shit, okay, yeah, I'm actually doing this. Victimhood mindset is a really big one as well, which means you're not taking responsibility, you're outsourcing it. So helping someone to see that what they're actually doing and how it's hurting them is another big one. you know
There's
um
a there's a thing that I got from, and I mean, I forget who I got it from now, and I've tried to find it, but it's
okay.
like either Brian Tracy or Wayne Dyer, I think. But he said that there's a model for life, and you're describing it. So I just want to underline it because this says it very succinctly. It says people who are unhappy and unsuccessful think of two things. People who are happy and successful think of a different set of two things. So unhappy, unsuccessful. What don't I like, and whose fault is it? So there's no responsibility. It's all, well, I'm like this because of this, right?
Yeah.
And we see this all over the world, right? Whether we're blaming a government, our parents, the patriarchy, where I was born, everything.
Yeah.
Not to say that those things are all invalid, but it won't get us where we want to go to just be, What don't I like? And it's the fault of this. Blaming oneself, same thing. It's not the same as responsibility, right? Just feel bad. Happy, successful people, exactly what you're saying. What do I want? How do I get it?
Yeah.
Right. So I just think it's so powerful how you're breaking down your system here. And yeah, keep going. It's great.
And the other thing that I find quite impactful is helping people to challenge their beliefs.
To challenge their beliefs.
Challenge their beliefs. So I'll give you an example.
Please.
It was a female client, but it doesn't really matter. She had this belief. Actually, no, it was. I have a better example with a male client. He's like, well, he had a really terrible, bad communication with his father, and like very, very unhappy relationship with his father.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't have a conversation with him. Like he always gets super mad and angry, and like it's just like it's impossible to have a conversation with him. And I asked him, like, well, when is the last time you had a conversation with him? Like an actual genuine conversation. It's like, oh, maybe like 8-9 years ago. So I was like, so you're living in a reality and a belief that from 9-10 years ago, where the last time your dad went a little bit crazy, that it's still exactly the same. He hasn't changed, you hasn't changed. The exact same thing is going to happen again. And that was so eye-opening for him because he realized, oh shit, maybe that is not even valid anymore, that belief. Because you haven't even checked if this is still true or not for 9 years, And then I pushed him to have a conversation with his father. And like, it was really challenging. I did a role play with him where I was the father, and it's like, you actually what do you want to tell your dad? And then he was struggling, and then we flipped around, and then, I turned into him, and like, basically, because at that point I knew a little bit of the story, and I was like, okay, X, Y, Z, I just give him a whole thing. Super easy, like not complicated. Like these challenging, uncomfortable, difficult conversations, they don't have to be challenging and uncomfortable. They really don't. Make them in our minds so challenging and difficult. And then he did, and he had a conversation, and then he sent me a message and was like, you know what? I'm so grateful for you because I realized this belief that I had from 9 years ago, it was so not true at all anymore. And I had like, it was a little bit clunky in the beginning, but then like, I told him very honestly and openly where I was at, and so did he. And then they had this deep, 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 beautiful, long conversation that ventured into like totally different topics. And it changed basically the whole family dynamic, not just between the two of them, but between the whole family.
Oh, yeah, of course it would. Yeah.
Challenge these beliefs.
Yeah, it's a tough one because trauma essentially is the stuck state that the danger from the past is still present.
Yeah.
And some of it is still hooked in us and some isn't. And so it's interesting because to be able to deal with it that directly is amazing. And yeah, bravo. As someone who's had and continues to have struggles with my dad, yeah, it's such a moving thing for men. The number of men who have wounded relationships with their fathers. I mean, I've been running men's groups for many years, and most of them struggle with their dads.
Yeah.
Right. And so I really do believe that this work is crucial because I said earlier, as we heal men, we also benefit women. But that covers pretty much everybody, right? Yeah. I mean, yes, there's people who identify as all kinds of things, but I think it benefits everybody. As men heal, it heals the world. Yeah. And because for you to be raised the way you were raised means that your son now gets to be raised without layers of trauma being heaped on him. Right? Mm-hmm. The work that you're doing with men means that their kids get to be raised with a healthier man around. And the studies show that kids who grew up without men really, really struggle and suffer.
Yeah.
It's even shown like a single mother and a single father, the kids with just a dad do better in a lot of measurable ways. And not that it's a competition, but I just have a lot of tenderness around saying that women are more nurturing and whatever than men, because I think it's just a different form of nurturing. And I
Agreed.
think that the world needs more of, I see it as husbandry, right? Similar to the word husband, but it's like attending to the nature and the resources around, almost like a gardener. Am I
Mhm.
creating the environment where things can thrive, and then holding that as a safe haven? That's part of my theory.
Yeah, yeah, nice. So I kind of want to go back to your
Please.
conversation that you brought up with your dad.
Yeah.
Are you open to talk more about this?
It's a little tender, right? So it's tender because I don't think he's ever listened to my podcast, but it's fresh. I've done a
Mm.
lot of work with my dad. Um, and so it's been a fascinating thing where having him around drags me down and has for a long time. And he's been there for me in some crucial moments in my life. And in some ways, I think saved my life because my ex stepfather was abusive and my dad didn't know and he was being kept away. And so I credit my dad with a lot of great things about me. But yeah, I didn't know whether I wanted to say that out loud. There was an earlier point with just how unconditionally your dad was loving you, is like that line came up. So I've said it now.
Yeah.
Don't think I'll cut it out in editing. And
Oh, you
yeah.
shouldn't, man. It's like it's part of you. It's part of your journey. It's part of like why you are who you are,
Mm.
which is absolutely beautiful. And even the fact that you're like, hey, I'm working on this. I'm working with my dad, and alone on like solving whatever there is so we don't take that trauma on to, the next life. And like, I think it's super important for all of us to be also there's a difference between being vulnerable and being weak, and showing as a man, showing a little bit of vulnerability, and owning that is actually strength and it's not weakness.
I agree with you. And there's something that came up in me sharing that I want to ask you about, right? Because essentially pointing out someone's weaknesses isn't coaching and isn't supportive always. It's
Sure.
how you do it. So what makes criticism just a poke in the eye from just like almost like a verbal assault to something that can actually help the person, in your opinion?
Ask that again, please.
Yeah. So if you're going to be coaching somebody or standing for a friend or loved one, and you want to tell them an uncomfortable truth that you
Yeah,
think will help them,
yeah.
what's what can you do to make sure that the communication lands as tough love, not just an emotional beating?
Yeah, cool. I have a framework for this, which I
Beautiful.
gave a client of mine basically. It's the first thing that you do, you ask for permission. Hey, there's something that's really close to my heart, and I kind of want to share that. Like, can you give me the space so I can express myself? And then
Yeah,
they
you're
say
willing to
yes,
hear
no,
this.
right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I
Yeah.
need to hear this. Okay, they say yes. So now all of a sudden you have like, okay, you have the buy-in. The next thing you do is like you share your own feelings. It's not like, hey, you did this and this and this wrong, and that's why I feel that way. It's like, no, like I'm feeling abandoned right now because of XYZ, right? It's another thing. And then you basically can go further. So the first thing is always like asking for permission. Then two, you lead with your feelings. Then, or actually, you can even bring in what are your intentions for this as well? What's your goal? What are your intentions for this conversation that you bring these things up?
Yeah.
Um, and then ultimately, you want to find like some sort of a compromise, a solution, how to move forward. You know, um, and sometimes you have people they interrupt each other a lot, and you can't even bring it out loud. And then he's like, hey, look, I asked you for one thing and you said like you're gonna give me that space so I can express myself fully. And I'll let you know when I'm ready. And then I'm happy to hear everything that you have to share as well. But give me that space. If you can't even give me that space, then like we might as well stop here right now. So you gotta be strong like in your own determination of like, no, like this is what I need to say. And I'm gonna say it. Does,
Yeah. I
does that
think
make
that
sense?
totally makes sense.
And to be honest, like bringing this back into like a very specific example with your dad, if your dad's methods of communicating with you really don't like seem to come to any type of fruition that it can land, like it's your responsibility to stop it.
And that's what I've had to do, which is tough because I love my father and he's been there like at times, never when I ask. There's
Yeah.
a judgment. And I was telling you this before we started recording, but I think that it's tough sometimes. It's been tough for me. I'll just speak for me to see that the person has good in them and to not necessarily put down my lightsaber like Luke Skywalker at the end, like to keep myself in a position that feels strong and protected. Because I don't disagree with a lot of the things that he wants me to do and areas of growth, but his methods drag me down, and so I can't get to those things as easily as I can on my own. So it's just where I find myself.
Yeah. Have you ever talked to your dad about when you came to Bali, when you had this like freak accident? Is that ever like, has this ever been a conversation that you brought up?
He doesn't listen. He won't listen. So I've tried. I have a lot of I think I'm a pretty decent communicator. So I've attempted it. I have attempted to have those conversations. Didn't go very well.
Yeah, sometimes we just have to accept we're all on our different path and journey, and the biggest strength and power that we can show someone is like walking away from that. And I don't mean like disconnecting from your father and like all that, but just like, okay, we're on a totally different plane here right now. It clearly does not work out the way and that's okay. Like, you do you, I do me, and like my strengths and my power, this is what you actually ultimately want from me. It's like, I'm doing this right now.
I've been trying this with my dad for a long time. So it's a little bit tender to be sharing this here, but I think it's important because I think you can love somebody and realize that currently it's not working to have them around. It's one of the reasons why I do facilitate men's groups is I think that it's so important for us to heal. But my ex-stepfather was abusive. And leaning into whether I name him or not at some point has been a thing I've been wondering now that my mom passed away.
Yeah.
But like he was violent and would like choke me and throw me around. And one time he like took chunks of skin out of the back of my neck with his fingernails and lied about it at school because I didn't want to, I don't know, betray the family is how it was put to me. And he had a terrible relationship with his father. And so one of the things that I made up was that led to qualities that I never wanted to embody, having unhealed elements relative to father. And so when I moved in with my dad at the end of high school, he didn't know what was going on, and he was in a men's group. And he was really solid. And there was a moment where I gave the men's group that he was in the credit for why he was like this. And my dad can be quite wonderful. So yeah, all that to say that I think that the work that we're doing might not always be able to be done directly. Currently, and I don't think this is the truth forever, I hope, but right now, it's better for me to have my dad away, but it doesn't mean I can't heal with father as an energy and with myself. I think
Right.
I'll maybe cap it there a little bit for me. I want to lean into.
Let me say this though,
Yeah,
like
please.
thank you, like for just being so open and transparent. Like those, those are things that I never knew about you
Yeah.
either. And in some ways it explains so much more who you are and why you do what you do, and it's like, I think it's always so beautiful. I think Katy Perry said this. It's like when you turn pain into purpose, and when you turn pain into power. And I think that's so in some way, like, just because you're coach, we're just human beings like everyone else. We have our struggles, we have our, like, ups and downs, and, like, our challenges and whatnot. And actually those are super, super important for us, because then we know how we can help others. And also it just takes away this pressure of, like, we need to be perfect, because no one is freaking perfect. Like, no one, like, I don't even think anyone wants to be perfect. It's a fucking boring life if we are,
Yeah.
so you, like, with all the experiences that you had in the past, and even like this freak accident and whatnot, in many ways, that's like, those are gifts, because they give you so much more color of that painting of life. You have so many more shades that you can paint your picture now with.
I appreciate that. There's a couple things there, and I want to respond because I think it's beneficial for anyone listening, and for me. But a lot of my favorite qualities about myself, I think, in a lot of ways, are trauma responses. The level of compassion that I have, the level of empathy that I have, um, I think stems from not wanting anyone to go through things that I went through, and it's become identity in some ways. And so, like, these 6 guys who walked out of the Vipassana, and like all the men who struggle, there's just such a compassion that I have, being 6'6", 220, 30, I don't know how much I weigh right now, pounds, where people think that I am this colossus. And to, for a lot of years, hid all of this wounding, right? To realize, no, I can say it, I can talk about it, but I don't have to be it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a lot of the work that you're doing with men, saying, like, you can be healthy, you can be this solid tree with deep roots that's unshakable, right? And so yeah, I want to honor the space that you bring, because I didn't really think I was going to lean into all of this, but I trust you. And yes, I'm going to be publishing this, and other people are probably going to listen because they tend to listen to the podcast. But right now, just talking to you, right, is why I'm answering the questions the way that I am. And so I want to honor our friendship and your presence. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, man, I'm super proud of you. And because saying all the, I mean, I'm having goosebumps right now, to be honest. Like, saying all these things, and putting it on the table, it's for me, from what I've learned in my practice, it's such a big piece of healing. Because, like, we talk about stuck energy, right? You have this
Right.
stuck energy in the body, and sometimes a very easy way to release that is just talking, speaking it out loud, because that's how you move that energy. And I've seen this so many times with clients of mine, when I, like, have these role model role plays and whatnot, how much it shifts and changes when you take them through a visualization or a meditation, and then they speak these things out loud. And in
Yeah.
some ways, that conversation and that presence with each other that we had, allows these things to really move,
What's
you know?
safety? And
Yeah,
this is a piece that I think is really important with working with men, is that people don't realize how unsafe men feel to talk about their feelings,
yeah,
right? To talk about truly vulnerable things. But often in relationships, like, men will have the experience of sharing, and the polarity vanishes, or the woman's not attracted to him anymore, or like it wounds the dynamic. And so creating safety for men is hugely important. And I think that it starts with men.
agreed. That's why
Yeah.
brotherhood is so important.
Hugely important.
Brotherhood is so important, to have some good solid men around you that you can really open up, that you can really, like, pour your heart out if you have to, that call you out on your bullshit, that are there for you when you really need them.
Yeah.
It's like, it's such a gift to have that. And for all the people who don't have that, it's like one of those first things that they should start developing. Be that for someone else, and then automatically it will come back to you, that, like, someone else will show up for you as well. And we don't need to be necessarily all the time be vulnerable in front of, our women. Like, obviously we need that polarity, it's super important, but we need that outlet somewhere else. And
I think when women
like,
say that they want men to be vulnerable, I don't think they mean dump every wound that you have on the table on a first date, right?
you're so right.
And so I think like we want to make this clear
Yeah,
is the vulnerability that women want from men is like little droplets to see that you have a heart. Go
correct.
deal with your stuff with guys
Yes.
or like maybe women friends or therapists, but like relationships aren't free therapy.
Nope.
Deal with it somewhere else. Like
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I
And,
agree.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like
it's big. Go on.
yeah. I just wanted to say, like, you said calling each other out on bullshit. How I say it is like hold a standard with grace.
Yeah. Well, and
It's not always grace, but yeah,
exactly, right?
hold a
It's yes,
standard.
yes, I agree. And like having these high standards is basically, if you're not operating on these high standards, then someone needs to gently, or sometimes like with a really harsh, like calling you out.
Mm.
So coming back to the whole Vipassana thing from the very
Please.
beginning, you have these 6 men, they're committing, they're putting their word out there. It's like, okay, I'm going to stay for those 10 days. And then they don't. So they're not keeping their words.
Yeah.
They're not doing the thing that they said they want to do. How can any woman really trust them? How can
And
any
they can't
man?
trust themselves.
Exactly. So like that's the first thing. If you don't, as a man, if you don't figure out a way like how to actually show up for yourself and the people that whatever you tell other people you're going to do and actually do that, then like you're basically putting yourself in a position in this world, in this environment with the people around you where people can't really trust you.
Yep.
You know? So it's like one of those things, and someone needs to tell you this
Yep.
rather than sugarcoating it. And I'm German, that, so like I love to be like straightforward, direct. There's no fluff, there's no rainbows or no glitter dust and all that bullshit. Like, no, let's put it away. Like, what is it? Like, let's put it on the table and look at it.
And in Bali, glitter just gets on you. You don't know where it comes from. Yeah. But no, I appreciate that. The directness, I think, is hugely important. Because again, you have a way of doing it, right? So if anyone's thinking of working with you or sending people like to you, you have a way of doing it where it's direct, but it doesn't feel insulting,
No.
right? You do it in a way where I do think that there's a large helping of grace to how you
Yeah.
show up. And it's direct. And again, I think it's important to underline that because people often will separate those. But I think they can happen at the same time when you have that integrated core.
You know what it is? It's because it comes from a place of love.
Mm.
You know, it really, like, the intention is very clear. It's a very simple one. I just want to help,
Yeah.
and I know sometimes these things we need to look at the harsh truth, and someone needs to say that. Like, as a coach, and this, as a coach, you're not trying to be their friend. They become friends, but like, you're not paying me to be your friend.
No, you're being
Your friends
friendly.
exactly. That's very different,
Yeah.
right? But
Yep.
friends, they don't necessarily tell you the things that you need to hear. So there's a big difference. So I find it very, very important to make that distinction. Like, I'm here for you. Like, we're on the same team. We're
Oh.
playing like for it's the same goal. We want to win that game. you know
I'm laughing because I had this come up with a client this week where a friend was telling my client basically just agreeing with their story that would keep them in upset.
of course.
Right. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, because this friend said this, I see this in this way. And like my upset is validated and right.
Yeah.
And so it took a minute to calm them down and get them into does this serve you and actually take you to where you want to be? And the end of the session was so beautiful and powerful because we got to the place where they realized, oh, I let myself get derailed from who I say I want to be because this person who I love and I like and whatever was telling me what I wanted to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and the other way around, and you work with women too, right?
Yeah.
So there's one really interesting thing that I observed working with women, and it goes back to why it's so important for men to look for the work. Is often there's such broken dynamics that they have experienced with men in general. So for them to look for a male coach, what happens in the background without them even knowing is like it's a whole reframe of the relationship that they have with men in general.
Yeah.
Because they're getting a very different idea of what a healthy masculine can actually look like.
Yeah.
How that can be in relationship to them, and there's so much healing that happens just because of that. Which I didn't know when I started working with women, but I found that's one of the major things. And the other piece, actually, when they are in unhealthy relationships with men, to help them to identify and realize, oh shit, I'm accepting so much bullshit. I'm accepting so much crap. I'm like so like out of my own integrity of what I feel like I can actually have and deserve in life in terms of happiness and like, just respect. That they're coming out. I mean, look, I had clients going through divorces and like breakups because of the coaching. And sometimes they even come to me with the idea of like, I just need to help. I need you to help me to get the confidence to get out of this relationship.
Yeah. It's amazing when people know, when they do know what they want and don't feel like they can get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's them, because they're still accepting a lot of things that they shouldn't, out of fear, out of like, whatever. And these shifts and changes, again, it's the polarity, right? The masculine and the feminine. How do we respect ourselves? And then how can we respect the other as well? But it starts with us and the love
It's
that we
almost
have.
heartbreaking though, the lack of solid males for both men and women to I did this affirmation audio. It was a script that a friend wrote, and it was a pretty generic script. And I asked if I could share it once I recorded it. The responses of just tears of women saying, "Oh my God, I just needed to hear this." It's beautiful, right? My ego likes to hear that I'm benefiting people, and great. But it's also a minute of audio that's scripted, not necessarily about them, and just the hunger to have someone say something nice with a safe male presence and voice. So I think, again, like I've said, the work that you're doing, I think, is hugely important. The work I'm doing as well. And yeah, thank you for doing it.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
We're all here to help and support each other, to give love and to receive love, and just like to spread some goodness, because we all have so much goodness, and sometimes we don't even allow ourselves to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And giving people that moment to shine, and giving people that empowerment to like they can do it, they can have it, and like really helping them to take them on that path is so rewarding.
It really is. Yeah.
I had a client, maybe like as the last story, because we're already like at pretty much 2 hours, even though we only wanted to
Is it
go for
really?
an hour.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
we talked a little bit before we hit record, but it's yeah, I was going to start wrapping up, but it keeps going into.
right. It's so nice because
I'm
like it
loving
just
it.
reminded me of what you just said. I had my client from LA, singer, songer, actor. We worked together now for almost a year, and we did a recapitulation because her birthday was like 3 days ago. So I did an exercise with her where we properly look at everything that she's done last year.
Yeah.
And once we wrote it all down and we looked at it, and I really like helped her to see like, you have done so much, like, like really to help her to be so proud of herself and see that like the tremendous amount of like shifts and changes and accomplishments that she has achieved. Like it brought her to tears, because we rarely take the time to really celebrate our own wins. So we need
So
someone
true.
else to, right?
Celebration, I think, is can be stingy with it. But yeah, I just started journaling again. It's been giving me again this renewed sense of just how much is moving in my world. So yeah, I love your story.
Yeah, man. Bro, you're a powerful human being.
Thank
And,
you.
sometimes sometimes we all forget that, and like all the adversities that he had to go through, and like the way how you recover, that just then itself is a huge testament of like how powerful, how strong, and how amazing you are. And like basically from the moment that I know you, like like doing this work, bringing me into this whole coaching type field and whatnot, and helping me to go through my stuff, and like all these other people, and then it's like, yes, you should celebrate yourself, and yes, you should document it, and yes, you should put it out there, brother. Really.
Thank you. Yeah, it's we're going to wrap up in a second, but just thank you. It's starting back up, right? Like I've still been coaching and stuff, but I think I've done maybe 10 episodes in the last 3 years, right? And most of them were pre-recorded, so I just published them. So starting back up feels tender, right? Even though I've done hundreds of these in the past. So yeah, thank you for speaking into it again with so much generosity and love. I feel it. Thank you. All right, let's cap it there. We can do another episode. I feel like there might be more in the tank, but this was beautiful. Before we go, do you have any last parting words of advice for life athletes looking to level up? And then where can people find out more about you? And we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Okay. Advice. I think we already said it, man. Celebrating your own wins, looking at yourself through a lens of truth rather than the way how we want to see ourselves, but really there's one exercise that we discussed earlier. Just freaking do it, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to give you so many opportunities to shift and change things around in your reality.
Yeah, tracking your day, what you're actually doing.
Tracking your day, like meticulously. And it's good, and then if you really want to make some shifts and changes, then get some help. Like look at it. Okay, here's the real advice at the end.
Okay.
Everyone in every athlete, every musician, every professional chef or whatever, they had other people coaching them. They had trainers, they had personal coaches, they had personal trainers. It's impossible to get to the top in whatever kind of field you're in if you don't have anyone on your side who's pushing you and helps you to see and look at things a little bit from a different perspective. And 100%. It's the same in life. We kind of think like we've figured it all out. And it's like, no. I mean, I don't know where I would be if I didn't have all these different coaches on my side over all these years, including it's a massive shortcut to get where you want to go.
I love it. So where can people find more about you?
SaschaHaert.com. Heart with AE, not EA. Sounds the same, but it's different. Or my Instagram, Sascha_Haert. And then pretty much everything is there. And just, if you feel inspired, reach out. Let's have a chat. Let's jump on a call and see if it's a good match. Because not everyone is a good match for each other. So, it's really good to get to know each other and see, okay, how can we actually help and contribute and support each other?
I love it. Sascha, thank you so much. We'll put all that in the show notes and on Instagram when I publish the episode and all that. Thank you for your time, your generosity. It's been just such a treat to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, man. And thank you for, taking that little bit of inspiration and momentum to start it back up, your podcast. And,
I love it. Yeah, we didn't say this in the episode, but just to underline, you reached out because I came up during the Vipassana. So we talked about the Vipassana a lot, right? And so I just feel so honored. It's nice to be thought of. And thank you. And then life athletes, remember, it's your life, it's your game. Level up. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Life Athletics Podcast. We are incredibly grateful for your support and for being a part of our community of change makers and visionaries. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our amazing guest, my friend Sascha Haert, for sharing his inspiring story and expertise. Your presence has truly enriched this conversation and touched the hearts and minds of our listeners. Thank you. I'd also like to express my deep appreciation to Mafulaka, my friend and birthday twin, for providing the incredible music that accompanies our podcast. Your talent and creativity has added a special touch to the episodes, and I appreciate you greatly. Before we wrap up, I want to encourage you to take a moment to rate and review the Life Athletics podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback and reviews play a vital role in helping us reach more individuals who are seeking inspiration and guidance on their own journeys of personal growth and positive change. And speaking of podcasts, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to check out our new show, our other show, Next Us, where we delve into the ideas and innovations shaping the future of life on Earth and humanity. As we conclude today's episode, I want to leave you with a powerful invitation. Take time this week to get extra clear on your game in life. Look at it from different angles and from different areas of life. I firmly believe that from a healed and healthy place, we can all be winning our games, and that this would make the world an even better place.